sharing like this? Yeah? Okay. Can I now say? Okay, now we are ready. Welcome everyone to this first webinar on early childhood education and care on the School Education Gateway. We are truly happy that so many have signed in and are joining us for this first webinar, which we have, where we will focus on inclusive practices in early childhood education and care and on inspiring them. So my name is Tove Moxtas Linde. I will be moderating this webinar that hopefully brings together both teachers and early practitioners, researchers and policymakers from all over Europe. I have been fortunate enough to be joined by two very inspiring speakers that will provide different perspectives to these topics. I'm trying to move it. Okay, so I'm doing this then. Yeah, there we are. So, doing the research perspective, Dr. Cecilia Aguiar from the University of Lisbon, a researcher participant in an ongoing European research project called ECEC, will talk about embracing all types of diversity in early childhood education and care and research perspectives about what works. From the practitioner's perspective, kindergarten teacher and pedagogical leader Jannicke Rosvold Sagosen from Kidsa Østund Kindergarten in Norway, she will talk about communication with parents, respect for diversity, and how their Erasmus Plus project on developing teacher competences for the future impacted their thinking and practices in her and her center's everyday life. From the policy perspective, I will, as now a national expert in the European Commission and coming from the Norwegian Ministry of Education and Research in Norway, give input on how national and local practices for inclusive early childhood education and care can be supported by European level policies and activities. After that, it's your turn. We will invite you to participate actively through a word cloud and through an open floor discussion via the chat. And I can see that you are already in there, so it looks promising so far. We will take you through the rest of it as we go along. So the three overarching questions that we have, that we put on the table today, and where we will join you in the open floor chat, is to look at what research can tell us about how teachers and staff can create inclusive pedagogical practices in early childhood settings and classrooms, and what happens when children and families with diverse backgrounds join everyday life in early childhood education and care settings. And the third one is on the policy development and how European policies can support national and local practices. To have input on the first question, we will now leave the floor to Dr. Cecilia Aguiar. Cecilia, the floor is yours, so now you can demute your... yes, there we are. Hello, Cecilia.
Hello. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a true pleasure to participate in this webinar on inspiring practices. I hope I can be inspirational. Today, let me just, yes. I will be talking about how we can embrace all types of diversity in early childhood education and care, and building on the work of the ISOTUS team that's working on inclusive curriculum, pedagogy, and social climate. So I'm building on the knowledge built by several teams across Europe, and I'm talking on their behalf. So I hope I represent them appropriately. To set the stage for our discussion, I would like to bring your attention to a very recent report from UNICEF that has important messages regarding inequality in children's education in rich countries, which is very interesting. And I think 3 points are interesting regarding this report. One point is that poor children are less likely to attend preschool in these rich countries, and a lot of diversity exists between, and differences, gaps exist between the richer and the poorer in terms of attendance of early child education settings. A second message is that there is a lot of variance that really explains what's going on in children's reading scores at grade 4, that is explained by what happens in the school. So schools can do a lot to reduce gaps between children's reading scores. And a third message is that migrant children are at a disadvantage, and this disadvantage is quite visible in their reading scores at age 15. So there's a lot we can do at the school level, but there's a lot we have to do to reduce these inequalities. So this is the stage for our work. And our goal is to describe the key success features or successful or promising interventions, programs, projects that aim to reduce social and educational inequalities through curriculum design, through classroom practices, or school social climate. And this is where we have been working on for the last almost 2 years now. We have realized that there are a lot of success features, and we have organized these features that are built on the perspectives of participants and on research data about what works. So a lot of these features have been organized in terms of the level of the system where they can be analyzed. And at the microsystem level, we focus on types of activities and types of interactions that support success, that support inclusiveness. And here I'm not just talking about children with disabilities, but all types of diversity. So I'm talking about children with a migrant background, children from minorities, and these success features can be used with all these groups. So what we have learned is that individualization is important. And this means that intervention in early child education and care should be built on individualized development and learning plans, which of course can be and should be designed in collaboration with families and, why not, children. We have some lessons that we can learn from early childhood intervention, and these lessons suggest that children learn by participating in meaningful activities and routines in the early child education setting. So it is important that these individualized plans actually specify what children need to learn to participate meaningfully. And of course, so that if we want these plans to actually be fulfilled, it's important to specify who is responsible for teaching, when should teaching occur, and where. So this is one feature of success that we have found. Another successful feature is children's participation. And this is really attending to children's voice and making children's voice visible. So this means that if we allow children to become involved in decision making, we are actually contributing to children's well-being. It is quite clear that when we ask children about what is well-being, they do say things about being heard, being listened to. So this is also a success feature that we have identified. Another one, which will not be a surprise to early child education teachers, is the focus on play. And a lot of professionals focus on play also by using experiential learning activities. And this means that they build on play and learning based on reflection and allowing and supporting children's reflection of their experiences. Research has shown that this type of approach promotes engagement and promotes learning in natural activities. Another success feature of interventions that are effective and promising is to be able to provide predictable routines, predictable activities for children. This is important because it allows for children to develop a sense of security and a sense of control of the environment, which allows them to participate. One other success feature that will not be a surprise again is the strength and the importance of positive relationships. And you will see that positive relationships are a cross-cutting theme across all levels of the system in terms of success features. And at the microsystem level, positive relationships and interactions between children and adults and teachers is very important. We know by now, and there's a lot of consistent research showing that positive relationships foster a sense of belongingness, a sense of connection to the group, a connection to the school. And this is actually a prerequisite for engagement and for learning. So this was also identified, and of course, we already knew that positive relationships were important and were expecting this, but it's very consistent. Another key support feature and success feature of interventions targeting inequalities and embracing diversity is support of both language, the first language of children, and support of children's second language, the language of instruction. And this is important because it values children's heritage, language, and heritage cultures. It promotes communication. It promotes the development of positive ethnic identities and makes diversity visible, but also a resource. And we have found some very interesting and effective interventions that actually provide support for both languages within classroom routines, which is important because it makes diversity a resource and a value across the everyday experiences of children, which is very important. Finally, at the level of the activities and interactions, we have found that the use of what some authors call equity pedagogies is also a key feature, a success feature. And this really means using group work and cooperative learning. Group work and cooperative learning approaches are very important because they promote positive contact. And they have the potential to be very important for reducing prejudice and increasing a sense of belongingness because they promote positive contact and meaningful contributions of all children. It is important that for this to work, children have equal status in the activities, and this means being able to contribute. And we all know that in early child education, contributions really earn membership, and they are really important. Going beyond the microsystem, we have to acknowledge that teachers are not alone and they should not be alone. So we have identified a set of success features that really talk about how we connect professionals and how we connect schools and families. And as before, positive relationships are very important here. And one key feature and what success feature really is communication. We have found that when communication is bidirectional, and this means that it is reciprocal, there are ways for teachers to communicate with families, but also for families to approach teachers and communicate with teachers, that positive relationships can emerge. And this is important. And it is also important that communication actually is effective. And this means that is done in a language that all families can understand. So means of translation, of reaching families in a language that they understand are very important. And communication is a really important tool, an important resource to identify competencies, to identify family strengths, and also to, when we focus on communicating about children's positive achievements and development, this is really a way of also strengthening families' educational aspirations for their children. So it is important. Going beyond communication, parental involvement has also emerged as a positive success feature. And this means that schools, early child education centers, and early child education teachers should provide meaningful opportunities for parents to participate in centers' everyday life. through celebrations, through classroom activities, through exhibitions of pedagogical work. This is important because it really helps families engage and know what's going on in the center and also contribute to the activities of the center. Some centers and some schools, some interventions have gone beyond creating opportunities for parental involvement and are really supporting parents in becoming involved. And this is done through different ways, such as providing childcare for younger siblings, or actually providing language courses for parents to be to have more resources in understanding the language that is used in the school and in the school documents, for instance. One other success feature that is consistently mentioned is positive attitudes towards families. This is really how we focus on strengths and competencies and resources. This is the basis for positive communication and meaningful involvement, and is cross-cutting, but it is especially important in this level of the system. Some centers and some interventions have also focused on mediated dialogue, intercultural dialogue. And they have done this through sharing personal histories in aiming to building a sense of community and building empathy. And it has also been acknowledged as a positive success feature. And as you see, we have gone through communication, through involvement, attitudes, and now we come to partnerships. Partnerships go really beyond communication and family involvement, and really partnerships are all about considering parents as equal partners. And equal partners, they have a shared mission, they have a personal investment, a personal interest in children's learning and children's well-being. And partnerships really require a definition of common goals and joint decision making. So this is what we would like to achieve in the end for all centers. I will go more briefly through the exosystem and then the microsystem. The exosystem is really about mobilizing external resources for supporting schools and professionals. But although we were focusing on what happens in the school setting and in the classroom setting, a lot of interventions really already incorporate dimensions of external support for professionals and schools. So a lot of centers and schools have really designed purposeful, really intentional staff recruitment and training strategies. They have also focused on developing effective communication among stakeholders, among different organizations that work with children, and in building effective institutional networks. I have jumped one that I feel is very important. And we have found examples of interventions that are using consultants or experts as a way of providing systematic support through ongoing, in-service, on-site professional development programs. And this means that there are professionals that are focusing on the team processes in the center, usually around a common theme, which in some cases, and importantly, are based on language support. So this means that you can have in some interventions that really built a system of professional support within the center to really reach their goals, providing training on team processes, which is really interesting. Finally, we have also identified a number of key success features at the level of the school macrosystem. And this means at the level of the school values and of the school culture. And what we have found is that when the curriculum is aligned with real-world challenges and real-world experiences, it is more accepted in the school and is seen as more meaningful. Also, When the curriculum is clearly, explicitly aligned with goals of educational system, it is considered to be more meaningful and more useful by professionals. Uh, Simultaneously, when school devise processes that are really aligned with the curriculum, this also means that there are opportunities to practice the competencies and skills that the curriculum includes. So if we have a curriculum that really focuses on democratic processes, it's important that the school functions as a democratic system, for example. Importantly, one success feature that we have identified is that when the school or the program is considered to have a strong identity, a shared vision across all actors, all participants, it is considered a success feature because we're then really talking about shared goals and work towards shared work towards these goals. Finally, some interventions have also focused on developing a strong community focus and building a common language with the community, and sometimes also developing an outreach intervention for the community outside the school, which is really interesting. So as you can see, there is a lot we can do to support inclusiveness, to support professionals in delivering inclusive practices. And a lot can be done at all levels, but it is very crucial for us to see that a lot can be done at the level of the microsystem, at the classroom level, within activities, within interactions, without forgetting all that teachers need to be able to provide these inclusive practices, which is, of course, a useful message to all. I would like to suggest 3 takeaway messages from our work. One is that much can be done at all levels of the educational system to reduce social and educational inequalities and really dealing positively with diversity. At the classroom level, multiple tools are available for teachers to value the contribution of each child, regardless of background, of competence, and to help each child reach his or her potential in a way in order to support their well-being, their learning, and their development of a positive identity, which is really important. Finally, teachers are clearly and not alone in this process, and families are particularly important partners with a special interest in ensuring both positive processes for their children, positive experience, and also positive context in terms of outcomes, in terms of learning and development. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate.
So thank you, Cecilia, for this presentation. And you really pinpointed, I think, some very core issues that we want to discuss today. And I think that I have many with me in your, when you have the focus on the microsystem, pointing to how the children can be actively engaged, and how this the inclusive practices is really focusing on the individual child and allowing them to flourish. I think that is a very important message to put out. But you were also pointing forward to what will come next, which is about the communication issue and the parental engagement and collaboration. So thank you so much for your presentation. I would also like to comment, and this is just because we have this wide term. It's called early childhood education and care, and it's really a big bag full of diversity of settings that are aiming towards providing young children with the pedagogical setting. And you were using the terms classroom and teachers. Other countries would have other type of terminology to describe their institutions, but it is the same that we are talking about. We are talking about the child groups and the children working and being together with other children and with teachers and pedagogues in the ECEC or early childhood education and care settings. So thank you so much. I will give, because we are pressed for time, we have so much to put on the agenda today. I will just now move on to the next speaker. which is pedagogical leader and kindergarten teacher Jannike Rosvold Sagosen from Kidsa Øvstun Barnehage in Bergen. And they have participated in the Erasmus Plus project, and she will let us know how they have worked with a very, very central theme in order to have inclusive practices, which is about communication with parents. So, Jannike, can you put on your cam and I will mute mine?
Yes, I just did.
Okay, you just did. You have to put on the start sharing part, perhaps?
Maybe there.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
There you are. Okay, so everybody is on then.
Thank you so much for having me. This is my first webinar, so let's see how this goes. I will take you through a bit from our Erasmus Plus project and a bit of the communication just within the project and also the communication in the kindergarten. And in the end, I will go through some examples of good practice. The Erasmus Plus project is a cooperation between 5 countries: Croatia, Poland, Greece, UK, and Norway. And the reason for this project is due to changes that reflect the growing up of children of today, contributes to globalization that has an impact on children from an early age. The openness of countries, population migration, and online communication and learning require special knowledge. It also requires skills of all participants in the process of education in order to adjust to these changes. Due to consideration of different perspectives depending on the cultural and national background, it required an international cooperation in the implementation of this project. It's based on a 10-step workshop program made in Croatia with a purpose to develop and enhance ECEC teachers' competence in communication skills, the skill to use a variety of sources of information and communication tools in order to explore, analyze, evaluate, and present information, cooperative and teamwork skills, problem-solving skills, and skills of making rational choices at the individual and societal level, resource management skills, and skills of valuing and respecting diversity. A bit of communication through the projects. We were 5 different countries, therefore 5 different languages and cultures. During this project, we have experienced that our communication skills have been tested. Already in the beginning of the project, where all communication was in English, there were several misunderstandings. Information had to be repeated, explained in different ways, from different angles. This is transmissible to our meeting with the parents. When parents' native language is different from ours, it is our responsibility to ensure that the parents understand all the information. How we give the information and what kind of support we need to amplify it with is crucial to establish common understanding. The project partners' cultural differences was very visible during our practice exchanges. For instance, in Norway, it is in our culture to use the nature in a way that is impossible for some of our collaborators. Not because they don't have the same nature, but because of governmental restrictions, and the parents would most likely protest. Due to the safety, they would probably not accept that their children climb trees, use knives as tools, or do any kind of risk play the way we do in Norway. The dialogue between us and the parents have to be open, where we need to listen to their thoughts about our practice. At the same time, it is important to explain what their child will benefit from participating in, for instance, outdoor activities and risk play. Documentation and information, together with research results, contribute to get a better understanding and a positive attitude towards our practice. We also have different frameworks to relate to. For instance, in one of the countries we cooperated with, the individual teacher can be held economically responsible if something happens to a child. So they automatically will have stricter boundaries for the children, and safety will be prioritized over exploration and activity. In Norway, all children are insured through the kindergarten, and the culture of safety in combination with exploration is the kindergarten's responsibility. We also have a different cultural view on the importance of children learning how to consider risks and how to handle them in a safe environment with the support from ECEC professionals, for instance, in the kindergarten. When we went to Greece, we went to Parga. We experienced that they have very different economical frames than we do, and they are fully dependent on parents' cooperation and donation to be able to run the kindergarten. They had a remarkable cooperation when it came to, for instance, voluntary work and different social events. What we saw in Parga inspired us to involve the parents in arranging social gatherings, and we try to do it more often than we used to do. To create a good cooperation with the parents, and maybe especially those from different cultures, it's important to give them the right kind of information and explanations. When the culture and language is different from your own, it's a possibility that you receive so much information that it leads to difficulties filtering out the most important. We have to be aware of giving the parents the information that benefits the child, explaining by using our body language, concretes, or pictures. And our attitudes towards the parents is also crucial for creating and maintaining a good cooperation. Respecting our diversities and keeping the child's best interests in focus. There have been a lot of changes through the projects. We have experienced how difficult it can be to understand both the language and the information in different contexts. In one of the workshops, there is an exercise where we have to tell a story to another person. This story will be told to all the participants one by one, and in the end, the last person will tell the story out loud. We did this in our colleague group here in Norway, and we have several who comes from different countries. When we did this exercise, the story became more and more different from the original story, and in the end, it was a totally different story. The reason it became so different was that our colleagues who have Norwegian as a second language didn't understand the context and all the Norwegian words, so they told the story the way they thought it was. And this was an eye-opener for us as colleagues, because even if we know each other, the communication skill can still be hard to master. And it emphasizes the importance of being open and clearly in our communication with the parents. We are now more aware of the importance of having an expectation clarification when children start in kindergarten. What do they expect from us? What are their experience with kindergarten, whether it's in Norway or elsewhere, and which expectations we have towards each other in our cooperation? These are important questions to ask. Here you see some pictures of some of our children in my group. Sometimes pictures say more than 1,000 words. And to get the parents to understand how we work and the importance of letting children explore and try out, documentation is very important. Here you can see the children go from first leaning on one of the employees, then they're helping each other, and then they're finding their own solutions. In order to create security, inclusion, and good common experiences, social events are important. Our experience is that the most successful gatherings are the ones where the parents have to work together with practical projects. Like you can see in this picture, where the parents are doing voluntary work at our kindergarten's campsites. Especially parents with a different cultural background express that these social events are very positive. They feel more included because they are given a chance to contribute and interact with other parents. And by being inclusive, respectful, and showing interest in other cultures, we wish to create security and good terms for cooperation. This year, the parents in the kindergarten arranged a social event on 24th of October. It's the International UN Day. All the 27 nations represented in our kindergarten was highlighted in forms of food, flags, artwork made by the children. The parents showed a great involvement both during the planning and on the actual day. So in the end, this project has made us better ECEC teachers in their cooperation with the parents. But most important of all, no matter who you are cooperating with, you have to be inclusive and open-minded to be able to establish mutual respect and understanding. If you succeed in this, you will give the children the possibility to grow and thrive. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Jannike, for your presentation. And Cecilia, it really struck me, didn't it, that the things that you were putting up from your research side was really now being illustrated by the example from the Erasmus Plus project that we now had a presentation from. So due to the time lag, we will sort of keep and hope to be able to be together until 800 hours. Cecilia, could I just ask you, are you able to participate till the end today?
Yes, I am.
Or did you need? Yes, you are. Okay. So then I will just move on with the policy perspective and just go hasty through it, because then I hope really that we will have some input from people via the chat. And there's a number of people here. So thank you, Jannike, for your presentation, and thank you, Cecilia, for yours. And now I will move on to mine. Okay, so going further now into the policy perspective, and I will rush through it. What research has told us, and it's really, really impactful, it is that the first years of life are of critical importance for child's well-being, development, and learning. And it's overwhelming what we are seeing now from the research side. And we know that it's beneficial for all children, but there is a big but, and it is that it has to be of high quality. And so when we are looking into the policy perspectives, it is about what type of policy initiatives and priorities we are seeing, and can it really provide the practitioners and the providers with the support and endeavors to have and develop these inclusive practices that we want to see happening. So the European Pillar of Social Rights was decided by the heads of state in Gothenburg last November, and it's really, really putting out a very, very strong message. It is that children have the right to affordable early childhood education and care of good quality, and that they have a right to protection from poverty, and that children from disadvantaged background have the right to specific measures in order to enhance equal opportunities. It's a clear message, but what we can see is that, yeah, there are 32 million children below the age of compulsory education in the EU, and only 15 million of them have access to early childhood education and care services. To be sure, the lack of places and provision is most strong under the age of 3 years of age for children, but what we can also see is that children from migration or minority background, or children with less educated or disadvantaged parents, they tend to participate to a lesser degree than all children. This needs to be amended, and what to do? How can better policies shape better practices, and so that we can achieve the goals and set for support the children of all children's well-being, development, and learning? How can we use the tools in our toolbox, and what are they as policy makers? Well, we have the policy documents, we have the structure and the organizations, the roles and responsibilities, we have the school and center culture, and we have the teacher and pedagogue and staff relationship with the children and the child group in the classroom or in the setting. And we can do things and develop and use these tools in order to support good inclusive practices by looking at the initial training, by looking at continuous professional development, and how we provide the opportunities for reflexive practices, among other things. So one of the things that policymakers did do was to, through 2014, develop a quality framework for early childhood education and care, one that is being now annexed to a proposal for a council recommendation on high quality early childhood education and care systems. This proposal has already been discussed and tried out on different levels in Europe. And the key feature to this policy quality framework is that the topics that it includes is interlinked. The access is not only linked to the number of places and the fees and the location, but it is also linked to the curriculum and pedagogy that is being developed, and to how the staff and the workforce is being supported in meeting children and parents. It is also linked to how the local and national governments develop their governance and funding systems that promotes inclusion. And on all levels, including the classroom or child group level, the reflexiveness of how one is doing, how this is really achieving the goals that we have set for ourselves, how this evaluation and monitoring, it needs to be informing the further development. In developing the framework, the policymakers found that there was a basis that should be evident throughout the quality developments. And the most important things being the voice and the image of children and childhood, and parents as the most important parents. We recently saw last year a report coming out from the European Agency for Special Needs and Inclusive Education, and in their final recommendation of the early years project that they were conducting, they put out as their first point that they want to, that it is important to develop policies and practices that enable all children, regardless conditions and dispositions, to belong, to be engaged, and to learn, just like you were saying, Cecilia. And like the quality framework, they also underscored that children are capable, curious, and unique human beings that must be allowed to develop their strengths, and this is the starting point for our pedagogies. So the framework says that a child is a co-creator of knowledge, making meaning of the world, who needs and wants interaction with other children and adults. So, how can we use the European collaboration to overcome challenging? Yes, we can use the peer learning across contexts. And these contexts are unique because every country, every local setting has their own history and traditions. So taking that into account, we still can learn from each other by sharing and discussing good practices and policies. We can develop common understandings like we did with the European Quality Framework, and we can expand and use the knowledge base. And I think that this illustration with the ISOTIS project and other research projects, we are really now expanding our knowledge base on early childhood these years. And I think that one of the challenges that we need to come to terms with is really how do we make use of the knowledge that has been developed. And this is a concern and indeed a possibility across all levels to take into account what has been developed now as a new understanding. But there is also a number of European initiatives that can reach out broadly, and there's even more potential, like the School Education Gateway that hosts today the first webinar on early childhood education and care, and like the Erasmus project that, well, we do have a lot, but we really need even more projects that targets the early childhood education and care sector. The third aspect is also a portal and a potential for collaboration. It's the eTwinning as a learning community for teachers. As of now, it hosts 600 teachers around Europe, and it could be even more if the early years practitioners also take the possibility to use this opportunity for learning across Europe. So yes, let's make use of what we have. So for the Erasmus Plus projects, I will just mention 3. There is an annual call for proposals. The deadline is February and March 2019. And what you need to do is actually to connect with your national agencies. They are key in order to make a project and to be successful. There are 3 different types of projects. There's the mobility projects, the strategic partnerships, and the policy reform projects. And you can read more about it and use the possibilities to engage. There's examples of good mobility projects like this one from where the Early Childhood Ireland, where sending their vocational trainers to Germany with a collaborating school, the Mathilde Weber School in Tübingen, to learn about their practices and to see how they were doing vocational training in Germany. We, as the working group of policymakers, were also presented with one from Lithuania, where the regional office were sending 54 kindergarten teachers on mobility projects across different countries like Finland, Malta, and Turkey. You've all seen the results from the strategic partnership that Jannike Rosvold Sagosen and the kids Øvstuen Barnehage and all the countries were doing in the KA2 section. And this one is the 3rd one, which is an example of a forward-looking cooperation where the ECEC is collaborating in the so-called Intersynthesis project with their partners, developing pilots, trying them out, and looking at how policymakers can develop a good system for integrated practices in early childhood education and care. I will just ask you all to have a closer look on what is there for that project. So with these 3 examples, I will just finish off this section, and then we will move on to the open floor. Actually, I wanted to invite you all to a word cloud, but as it is now with the time, I think that we will wait a bit with the word cloud, and then we will rather do the chat discussion. So I will have questions that you have up there. You were supposed to give me. Well, yeah. There was one question on what will it take for practitioners to participate. So this is from the chat. Okay. So did you hear what will it take from practitioners to participate? Probably that is for the Erasmus Plus. Yeah. So what you will do is that you will click on the link that I have provided you, and you will go and find information, and you will find your national agency, and then you can, because they are dedicated to give you the support and the guidance in order for you to actually develop your own project. So yes, and the SEG gateway, the School Education Gateway, and the e-twinning is actually also providing the possibilities to find partners, but I think that if you are pressed for time, I think the national agency would be your best tip. Are there any more questions to the participants or to the researchers? Could I invite Cecilia and Jannike just to come on with their cams and their microphones? Hi, Cecilia. And do we have Jannike also?
Yes. There.
There we have.
Yeah.
So we are all in the same room. Okay. There's another question. Yeah. So there's a question on the parental involvement. You were talking about the parental involvement, Jannike, and how you were sort of increasing the activities where you were reaching out more. Could you say something about how you were sort of what really happened in your group and your setting when you were deciding to how to develop a new type of arenas for involvement of the parents?
The thing is that we are more aware of the importance of having the parents to contribute to all the things that we do. So it's more of a better communication with the parents and wanting to listen to what they want to, how they can contribute to the group. They're always invited to go on hikes with us. They're always invited to join in whatever we do. So it's more of a communication part. Did I answer that well, or?
Yeah, so getting them really aboard and giving them the sense that they are that when they have ideas that they can come and go aboard with those, that would really be the key, wouldn't it? So Cecilia, when you are talking, you were also talking about the parental collaboration and how this is being supported and what you have found about that. So could you do you have any comments or about sort of what you saw for parents really to feel like they would like to join? Is there a barrier for parental collaboration that we could sort of do things with or try to build down, you think?
Well, there are many barriers, but there are many reasons not to let those barriers win. And I think from what I heard from Jannika's experience, I would say that parental involvement became part of the core mission, of the core identity of the school. And when that happens, it becomes really welcoming because it's part of the identity. And I think that's very important. You asked about barriers. Language can be a barrier. Some centers have overcome that barrier through actually mobilizing other parents that can actually be cultural mediators also in a sense. So there are attitudes are also a barrier. If you're focusing on what parents lack and not what parents bring as resource, it's more difficult to have a reciprocal and meaningful relationship. So just to name two.
So there's also a question here from Pashile, who is, how do you deal with parents having values that do not fit with your cultural values? And I think it's perhaps you have a comment to this, Jannik, and could you also, because I would guess that in your Erasmus project, when you were having discussions with the participants from the different countries, this topic have come up. So would you have a comment to that question?
Discussing values can be very hard because the values you have, it comes from your background, your family. But it's important to listen and respect the values they have, and of course, as I told earlier, that we have to kind of explain how the things that we do, how that benefits their child. So by keeping the child in focus, I think that we can, on some sort, come to a better understanding because it's in the best interest of the child. So it doesn't, as long as we have the child in focus, it's easier to get closer together.
Yeah. So. And this really points to something where I do think that if we are to discuss the inclusive practices, because it reflects us on so many levels, doesn't it? That we are sort of immersed in the culture that we are representing. Like you are talking about classroom and schools, and we are talking about centers. I mean, this is just labels, but at the same time, it's kind of our history of our organization. And when these values come into play, I think that this even for the policy making, I think that dealing with this kind of values issues is among the things that we have seen coming out from the research. So supporting, for instance, pedagogical practices, what we could see from the analysis from the ISOTIS project, the beliefs and the attitudes and the and how you were dealing with good practices is really about developing an understanding and being able to discuss, I think, that kind of different positions, if you want. So there's another question here about working with, yeah. Wait a minute. There's another question here. Oh yeah. About the participation in the, I will talk to you about the participation afterwards. But what I would like to see is to follow up the discussions that we are having now. So there's one from, I saw there was one from Geraldine. It's about working with parents. Do you yeah. So the language issue is coming up. So how do you really communicate when you are sort of having language issues then? How do you, are there resources that you have seen either through the research project or in practice, Jannike, because you also had 27 different languages, if I understand correctly, in your kindergarten. So how do you deal with it when you are not sharing the language with the parents? In practical terms, do you have any?
Usually we try to communicate in English, but when that doesn't work out well, we have different places in Norway we can get help, so we can have someone to translate for us, or yeah, maybe the parents know someone who is speaking better Norwegian or better English than we are, so we have to try to get a cooperation with them as well.
Yeah, so there was also now another question that was pointing to something of the same, which is from Geraldine. She says, working with parents, do you liaise with other organizations, for instance, community associations, to reach out and facilitate contact and discussions? So this really also pertains to the question about the language issues, whether these kind of local entities can be more engaged in terms of supporting the good practices within the school or the center. Would you like to comment on this, Cecilia? Did you see something of this happening in the research project that you were, or in the examples in your research project?
Well, I can give you one example. The Peaceful Schools in the Netherlands is actually has also an extension to the community, so the peaceful neighborhoods, and they aim to build a common language. So the school, as this liaison with outside organizations, neighborhood organizations, focusing on a common theme, on a common set of processes, which is very interesting. That could be an example.
I think obviously, and this is also coming onto the screen, that there's a number of topics that might be sort of challenging. You were talking, Jannike, about when you have the child's interest, because that is of course a shared interest between the parents and you as staff in the school or in the ECEC setting. It's really about looking at the child and their well-being and development and learning. Then you can overcome perhaps difficult also topics. So Livia, she's putting forward a question of whether you are starting to have conversations regarding gender and defining stereotypes, which would be a kind of also, I mean, type of discussion that could be potentially challenging, but also very, very interesting to engage with as adults that are looking at the well-being and development of the children. So have any of you come across those type of examples?
I'm not sure if I understand the question, but no.
It's probably about the gender equality things. It could be, or it could be like gender diversity. That is the number of genders. So, but that hasn't sort of come up in your discussions so far. No. So the question is really whether, because we are now 2 minutes over time, and I was really a timekeeper, and I would I must just say that this has been a very good success. Thank you to both of you for coming on with your examples, and it's clearly very, very engaging for the participants that has been in the room. Thank you to all of you for coming. There's a number of chat questions on whether they could, whether the teachers that are here could join even though they are in Brazil or Tunisia or around the world. We will put out a kind of a clarification on those questions, I think, on the web page afterwards, so that I'm sure that I don't answer anything wrongly. But I think that this really illustrates that this topic and even this platform for having discussions on early childhood education and care and on topics that are relevant to quality practices in ECEC, that there's a room for this and that we really need to use these kind of rooms. So thank you both to Cecilia and to Janneke for providing us with very, very relevant examples and also to engage with us in this first discussion. I'm sure there's going to be more of these events where we can all join and really chat away. Next time we will also do the word cloud, because that would have been super interesting, but as of now I think that we will close this room because we have promised to do so. So thank you also to the EUN for hosting the event technically, and thank you to our participants for joining. So we will just wave. Bye.
Thank you.